So let's start off with Unit 4, Learning Target number 5. And the name of the learning target is this. Here's what we're doing. For all of last year and so far up to January of this year, the only form that you know about for linear equations is slope-intercept. You're comfortable graphing in slope-intercept. You know what the slope is. You know what the y-intercept is. You can plot it. You can do pretty much whatever you need to do with slope-intercept form. It is the form that is the most usable and the one that you're probably the most comfortable with, okay? What you don't know is that there are two other forms out there that you have to learn. And by forms, I mean just the way you write it, okay? So today we're going to learn one, and tomorrow we're going to learn the next one. So the title for Learning Target 5 is I can write linear equations, because they're all linear, right? Meaning they're straight lines. Today we're going to call it point slope form. Okay? So far, you've only really known about slope-intercept form. Today we're going to learn about something called point slope form. Well, let's go up to slope-intercept, kind of as a side note. In slope-intercept form was y equals 2x minus 4. Well, why do you think they called it slope-intercept form? They called it slope-intercept form because with your eyes only, without having to do any work with your pencil, you know what the slope is and you know what the y-intercept is. There's no rearranging. You can tell that that's what the slope and the y-intercept is. That's why they chose that name. So what do you think I'm going to be able to find just from looking at an equation that's written in point slope form? The slope and one point on that line, right? And isn't that kind of all you need? If you have a starting point, before they gave us the y-intercept to start, right? So I would start at the y-intercept and then do the rise and the run. Well, if I wanted to graph in point slope, I would start at the point and then do the slope, the rise and the run, right? So, what you're going to be given is the point, meaning the x and the y coordinate of one point on that line, and your slope. Those are the two things that you're going to know right from looking without any math involved, okay? Oh, I always go back and forth every year when I teach point slope about whether I should just come right out and give it to you because it's kind of crazy looking, and then I struggle with that, but then I just decided I'm going to give it to you. So, here's point slope form. Are you ready for it? Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Woo! Looks kind of crazy. It's actually quite easy. It's all about placing things in the correct spot. That's all it is. So let's kind of dissect this equation and see what it means. Because you already know what a lot of it means, right? Okay? So if you have a couple different color markers that might be helpful, I'm gonna put this one in dark. So this y, this equals this parenthesis, this x. That's what I'm going to kind of bold in right now. So I'll give you a minute to reach for that. I'm also going to use 3 other colors if you have a total of 4. It's not important if you don't, though. It just visually helps you a little bit. So the reason I chose to kind of bold in that y, that x, and those parentheses are because the same reason that I would bold in this y and this x. Because they're going to be in your equation, right? That y and that x, those aren't the ones that are getting replaced. That's the y equals and the 2x. So wasn't there a y and an x in your equation in slope-intercept? Okay, so there's going to be a y and an x in your equation in point slope, and those are the ones that they're going to be. Well, the next thing I'm going to do is say, I put the slope right there. Which is kind of nice because wasn't the slope in front of the x in slope-intercept form too? So it's still kind of there. All right, there's a little extra twist to do with it. And then the other thing you think about is this. All you have to think about is, okay, the x value from the point that I'm given is going to go in that spot. And then the y value from the point that I'm given is going to go in that spot. So, like, when your parents give you a task to do and they say, put this here, put that there, make sure you bring this up to your room, put this in your brother's room, make sure this goes in the kitchen and take this downstairs, right? You just got to remember what to put where. That's all this is. Okay? So watch what I mean by that. So if I were to say, write the equation of a line in point-slope form with a slope of 4 and contains the point 3, 8, you just, that's your parents giving you that big set of directions. Put this here, put that there. You just have to know where to put the 4, where to put the 3, and where to put the 8. Okay, there's a couple little things to think about there. So, this is how I do it. I kind of look at it as, okay, the y minus, I leave a space for the slope, and then the x minus. So you will see me set up all my equations like that, because I know I'm going to have that y, I'm going to have the equals. Make sure you leave a little space in between your equals and your parenthesis, right? Okay? And now, I just have to put the slope here, I have to put the x value here, and I have to put the y value there. So I just have 3 blanks to fill in, and one of them's really easy, right? Which one's the easiest to do? There's the slope, right? There's no thinking to do. If the slope is 4, then 4 goes there. Okay? Now, putting in the points is what gets a little tricky, okay? First of all, people are tempted to put them in the order that they appear. They want to put the 3 here and the 8 here, because 3, 8 is the way it's written there. Wrong, right? Because if you go back up, y1 means what goes in this spot? The 8, the y, and the x goes with the x. So if it's a y, put it with the y. If it's the x, put it with the x. So these kind of flip-flop, don't they? Okay, that's the first part to think about. The second part to think about is this. This minus is part of the formula. So, for the first time in a while, you're going to have to look at this as, okay, cover that up. I want to take y and subtract whatever my y is. And that's 8, right? So I just put an 8 right there. But when you pick your finger up, it looks like a negative 8 to you, doesn't it? It's really not. That minus belongs to the formula, and that 8 is really positive, which is the opposite of everything you've been doing so far, right? So there's a little kind of retraining of your brain to do here, because you're going to look at that and you're going to think that's negative 8. Do you see why I color-coded it now? Do you see why that 8 is positive and that I kept that as a gray to go with the formula? Which means, what would I put here?
Is this side orange?
Yeah, I used a really bad color. I probably should have, what did I use the other hour? Blue. So this is, let's change this to blue. That looks like great. That's horrible. Okay, green. What else did I use my other hour? I can't remember what I used. Oh, I used blue, which was where? Well, look at it straight. There we go. It's hiding. Better? A little bit? Okay, at least it's dark like that. So now, if that 8 goes there, then what goes here? The 3, right? Okay, I know what you're thinking. That 3 looks like it's a negative, but it's not. That x minus is part of the formula. Got it? Let's do another one. So if I were to say, write the equation of a slope of a line in point slope form. It has a slope of -2 and contains the points 5, 7. Where would they go? So it's going to take you a little while to work with the formula before you actually start to memorize it. So it's going to be y minus equals space x minus, okay? And we can still do the color coding if you want. So the slope we'll put in green. Okay, so that goes there. Every time, no questions asked, right? So I'll try to keep it color coordinated for you this time. There's that. And this will be the last time I use color. It's just to kind of get you to see where they go. So this is the y, and I want you to subtract this y, which is what? 7. So put a 7 there. That one's done. And then take x and subtract the x from point 1, which is 5. So did you see what they did? They went from here and they crisscrossed, right? That's not so bad, is it? There's more to it than this, but this you get just started, right? Because now we have to talk about what happens. So are you okay with that, everybody, before we move on? What if contains the point -6, 4? Because we know negatives throw everything off, right? So let's start with, I'm not going to color code anymore, so y minus equals x minus. And eventually you'll do this enough that you can probably just write it from left to right if you start to get the hang of it. So let's put our slope in. Now this brings a question, what do I need to do? Do I need to put the fact that it's a -1 there? No. Is that enough to show me that my slope is -1? Yes. Could you put it there? Yeah, but you won't see it that way when we go in reverse order. So just know that if there's just a minus sign, that your slope is really -1. Just like it was here, right? Wasn't your slope -1? It's -1, okay? All right, so let's start with the y. Y is positive. This means y minus whatever your y value is. Now that I'm not color coding it anymore, boy, are you going to be tempted to think that's a -4, right? Kind of stood out that it was a plain old 7 before, but that is not a -4. That negative is really the minus sign, and it belongs to the formula. Got it? And if you need to cover it up, then there, you're looking at a +4, right? Now, what do you think I'm going to do with this -6? You've done this before. I just reviewed it a couple minutes ago, actually.
You still put -6? You don't put just 6?
So, is this okay? Or this is really what I want to do, right? So really, what could I do to kind of clean that up?
Just make it plus.
Yes. Could I just put a plus? Yeah. So is this probably the better way to do this? Yeah. Now, you're looking at it and you're thinking that 4 is negative and you're thinking that 6 is positive. And it's actually the opposite of that, isn't it? Because here's what you have to say to yourself in your head. I'm going to cover that minus up because that minus is the formula. Oh, that 4 is positive. Then there's no minus to cover up, but here's what you're going to say to yourself. You're going to say, well, I know the formula is a minus. So when it's a plus, it must mean that that minus was subtracting a negative number. So that's how I know that that 6 is really negative, even though it looks positive. Do you understand? Yes, you can move. I know that sun's right in here. So, does everybody kind of understand how we got to that? So I want you to try this one on your own right now. Ready? So let's try, your slope is 8. And I want you to have it contain the point 5, -6. Okay? So have it contain the point 5, -6. And let's see if you can put it in the right spot. Got it? Did anybody write it just from left to right and do okay with it? That requires a lot more understanding of it, right? So if you were able to do that and just go, okay, I'm going to do a minus. Oh, that y, you didn't put 5, right? Because that's the x. The y is a negative, which means when I go to subtract a negative, it's really the same as adding a positive. The slope is 8, and the x value is 5. Is that what you got? Good? Okay, very good. Because if you can go from being given this and writing this, do you think you can go in reverse order? Meaning if I give it to you in point slope form. So for example, if I were to say y plus 8 is equal to -2 times x minus 1, and start you off with that, could you give me the slope and the point? Yeah, you should be able to. It's kind of just works backwards. So the slope is the easiest, right? So get that out of the way. What's the slope? You're staring at it. It's -2. Point, be careful. You're going to be tempted. You kind of have to do two things opposite, right? You have to put it in the opposite order that it appears, and you have to take the opposite of the sign that it really looks like, right? It's so confusing. Some people want to say 8, -1. And I know when people put 8, -1 as a point that they have no clue what they're doing. Okay? Because number one, the order is completely wrong because that's the y and that's the x. And then the signs were off too. So you have two things to remember. So what is the actual point? Not 8, -1. 1, -8. Right? So think about this. Picture them crisscrossing, because that's the y and that's the x. And then that really is a positive 1. And that is only a positive because it was minus a -8. Got it? Okay. So try this one real quick on your own. Y minus 3 equals 5 times x plus 11. Then we'll move on. All right, think you got it? Anybody, what's the slope? Easy peasy. 5, what's the point? Anyone? Any?
-11.
Yep, -11, positive 3. Easy, move on? Okay, because there's two other things that go with this. What if I were to say to you, 4, 8, 2, 18. I know I've used this before, but I know it goes evenly. Write an equation of that line in point-slope form. So the first thing you're thinking is, wait a second. Before they gave me the point, they gave me a slope. Now they're just giving me 2 points? That's okay, because Learning Target 2 taught you some fancy formula that if you don't know the slope, but you're given 2 points, you can find it, right? By doing y minus y. And here really is the formula. And here's the deal. Some of you got that backwards. Some of you did it wrong on the last check for understanding. And you're doing the reciprocal because you're doing the x first. You got to get that straight. It's 18 minus 8. And then 2 minus 4, right? 18 minus 8 is? 2 minus 4 is -2. So what is your slope really? Okay. So now you have the slope, but then you have 2 points. So what question do you find yourself asking? Which one? And you know what my answer is? Whichever one you think is nicer. Whichever one you want to deal with. Because this is kind of a pain in the butt for me when I check these tests. You know why? Because there's 2 right answers. And I have to see if you have either one. Because one of the first right answer is y minus 8 equals -5 times x minus 4. That's one right answer, right? 4, 8. Another correct answer would be y minus 18 is equal to -5. That didn't change, right? Times x minus 2. You can pick whichever one you want. Yeah.
Will we ever have to solve these?
Well, that's a good question because Learning Target 7 has us working a little bit more with these. Yes.
Like you said, like the 8s and 18s are not really negative, they're positive, so we subtract them out.
Okay, no, I'm so glad you said that, and because somebody in first hour thought of that too. When you are looking at it as, because what she's saying is this, she knows that 2 is positive, right? She wants to know if I ever were, because was your instinct to like just distribute that -5, okay? And you're going to eventually, not today. When you go to distribute it, it's a -2 now, which kind of makes you think, well, what the heck? The reason being is when you put it in that formula, that gets it into that formula, and then everything's back to normal. Okay? Because when you go to distribute this, that is x minus 2. It's almost like that opposite thing of what you're used to doing just gets it correct for you, and then now it's all back to normal. Because you would never look at this and think, oh, negative 5x minus 10, would you? If you're looking at that and thinking that's a positive 2, that and that does not give you that. Okay? So it's kind of like the only time you need to look at that as getting it to be the opposite is that first step. Once it's in point slope form, all bets are off, back to normal. Okay? Did everybody hear that? I'm really glad you asked that, because somebody else, that's just so weird how how you guys all kind of think the same. Was anybody else thinking that if they go to distribute? So see, I'm glad you asked that. So no, all bets are off. That would be a plus 10. Okay? All right. So you have 2 correct answers, and you can pick whichever point you want. Okay? All right. One other thing to talk about is this. What if the slope was a negative 1/2 and your point was 0, 4? Because we know negatives and zeros screw everything up, don't they? So let's kind of go ahead and do what you think. Go ahead and do it. And then you're going to look at what you have and you're going to be like, that's kind of weird looking. Kind of see if you can anticipate what you think you would do. Now, that is a totally okay answer for today. Because you did what I asked you to do. You took the point and the slope and you put it in point slope. That's okay. Is this bothering anybody else over here, though? Is that really necessary? Can you just clean it up a little bit? You know what I mean by clean it up a little bit? Okay? So if your instinct is to distribute, this is fine over here. When you distribute this, you get negative 1/2 x, right? And then 0 times 1/2 means nothing. Is this an okay answer too? Yes. Hey, guess what? What I'm going to ask you to do in a couple days is put it in point or slope-intercept form. Wouldn't that just mean, I'm jumping the gun here, but wouldn't that just mean, boom, now it's in slope-intercept form? That's it. That's all there is to it. And so I already just told you what we were doing for Learning Target 7. But we're not going to think about that right now. Because here is good for today. Here is even better. Do you know what I mean? So, and then eventually we're going to use it to get back to what we know. Okay, so everybody okay with what to do when that is 0? Now let's see what happens when that's 0. Let's take the slope is 7. And the point is negative 8, 0. Go ahead and kind of see what you would do with that. So we're talking about special cases right now. Special cases are when something out of the ordinary happens. Something other than the norm and what you're used to. Okay, totally acceptable answer. That's point slope. But could you put it another way? Could you just put y equals 7 times x plus 8? And if you want to get really fancy, could you make it y equals what? 7x plus 56. However, stop right there, because the directions on today's assignment are asking you to put it in what? Point slope form. So do I want this as an answer? If the directions say write an equation with this information in point slope form and you give me this, I'm going to have to mark it wrong, because that's not point slope form. It's what? Slope-intercept form. Do you see the difference? You're going to really have to put these compartments in your head and say, okay, she wants this, I'm going to give it to her this way. But when I do ask it for this, are you going to know how to get it there? Okay, understand? All right, the last and final problem is always a tricky one. I know you guys love when the slope is 0 with a point of 5, negative 1, let's say. Okay, go ahead and try this one. You're going to be like, what? So what happens here? Well, what if you were to distribute a 0? What would that make this? 0. What would that make this? 0. So you would be left with y plus 1 equals 0. Which is the same as what? Y equals... Hey, look. Isn't y negative 1 right there? So do you remember when I said I could have saved all this work because as soon as I saw that the slope was 0, I knew it was a horizontal line, and it's y equals whatever y equals, right? What if I switched this and said, okay, now the slope is undefined? It wouldn't be y equals negative 1. It would be x equals 5. Do you remember that? So x would equal 5 if it was undefined. Y would equal negative 1 if it was vertical or if it was horizontal. But we don't need to really get into that too much today. Okay? So here's what you are going to do today. I'm going to give you these and I ask you to put it in slope-intercept or point-slope form. Then I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to give you this and ask you to, so for this one, something's missing over here. Like that one's a piece of cake. So what must the y coordinate be if there's nothing there? 0, right? Okay? So you think you got this?